Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 12:30 to 1:30 p.m. session of the 2025 Open Simulator Community Conference. In this session, we are pleased to introduce the presentation called the Viewer Panel. Our speakers are Puffball and HumbleTim. HumbleTim is the co-maintainer of the experimental Firestorm virtual reality fork, a champion of the Open Metaverse Interoperability Group, and an OMI delegate to the Metaverse Standards Forum. And there's a link we're going to paste in the local chat for you on that material. Here is Puffball's introduction. I'm Puffball, a 26-year-old software engineer with a passion for open source and federated systems. Though I'm not the most common sight on the grid, I've been working in the background on a Rust implementation of the protocol for my viewer project called Benthic. I was raised on free to play, massive multiplayer online role playing games, captivated by the way the worlds were shaped by the players and the natural friendships that could arise between anyone, anywhere in the world, based on an almost physical proximity to one another. But I was also heartbroken when those worlds would shut down or would be changed drastically to become more profitable by the company that owned them. Now, my dream, going back as far as middle school, was to become a software engineer who could create an open source, user owned, user run game that couldn't be ruined or taken offline. In college, when I found out about the Metaverse protocol, I realized that my dream was already a reality and I just needed to contribute to it. Well, please check out the website found at conference.opensimulator.org for the speaker bios, details of the sessions, and the full schedule of events. This session is being live streamed and recorded, so if you have questions or comments during the session, you may send tweets to at OpenSimCC with the hashtag pound OSCC25. Welcome, everyone. Let's begin the session. So let's see, who would like to start talking about your project? Humble Tim, do you want to begin?
Sure. So, I'm a seasoned software engineer by trade, but in this context, I think the Firestorm VR mod is kind of how I'm known, and one of my now half decade strong hobby projects. And I guess unlike classic viewer development, which might focus on core architecture or rendering pipelines, I see myself more as a feature maintainer or a modder. Uh, and I think it's actually a lot of fun to the challenge of bridging the gap between a massive legacy code base and then modern VR hardware.
So what you're saying is you're trying to create a feature by which someone can use a head-mounted display device to view virtual world content. Is that it?
Yeah. So the virtual world content, like a lot of the, if you come in like Firestorm, you're seeing a 3D universe that's being projected to a 2D screen.
Hmm.
And with virtual reality, if you render that for each eye, you get the stereoscopic aspect, and then you get a different kind of immersion. And uh, and it turns out that making that efficient is a little more challenging, but making it technically possible is a matter of rendering twice, basically rendering once per eye, and that's how the current VR mod works. And so it's a minimalist change that goes into the rendering code and basically renders it once for the left eye and then immediately renders it again for the right eye to achieve the basic effect.
Right, and then it handles, is that interlacing or however it reconciles those two images to present it as one to the user? I, I used to do VR research a long, long ago, and that was what my doctoral dissertation was in. So, we took one of our regions in Virtual Harmony, and we put it on a meta app. Eh, This was not a trivial thing to do. One of the things, barriers we discovered was we had 2 terabytes of content in the virtual world. And putting it on a Meta app, of course, was like putting it into an Android app, right? That sits on your face and, of course, uses their Oculus headset. And we noticed all kinds of differences that we had to do in our development. Do you face any of those same issues?
Uh, it, I'm, it's interesting because the way that the hardware stack evolved, this concept of asynchronous reprojection came into play, and that was, I think, kind of a turning point that made the VR mod for the viewer as this kind of minimalist render it twice approach feasible. So even if the viewer is only producing 15 frames per second, in a lot of cases, the like the Steam VR compositor layer, and it depends on the headset, but most of them these days can do. They'll fill in the missing frames, kind of like how like a TV might upscale to a higher frame rate,
Right.
um, and so that eliminates kind of the dire kind of lag effect that used to cause nausea even in the most brave early on. And so past that pivot point, um, it became feasible to actually, be in a headset for longer periods and with more diverse content. And the world will kind of turn into stop motion, kind of sensation. But when you turn your head, you're still getting the, 90 frames per second difference. So it still feels like you're smooth. Um, and so from that standpoint, the idea of optimizing content takes on kind of a different nature. It's um, that you're like one of the great things about the open sim architecture and being able to actually walk between different places and even different grids is that it's always pulling content in and out. And so I'd say that is maybe one of the biggest challenges on the horizon when it comes to a full featured kind of VR experience, would be uh, mitigating the user generated content ever changing stream. Like every time you turn your camera in Firestorm, it's potentially pulling in objects in and out of the scene to use the most of the memory that it has. Um, and so from that standpoint, it's an ongoing kind of a research area, I think.
That's it. I don't know if you saw Frank Ruloff's question, and we'll take that, and then we will uh, go to Puffball and talk about her project for a moment. So, Frank's question, he says, we did some work with VR headsets, and that would be in SceneGate, but it did not get enough resolution to use presentation using VR. Is that better these days? And is that what you were talking about with the performance?
Um, I think it's related. Yeah, I
Yes.
think it's like I think depending on your graphics card, if you try to run your Windows desktop at 4K resolution, you get different performance characteristics, and the way it scales, you know, uh, like 4K it's many more pixels that a graphics card would have to render like in a shader, and so as you increase the resolution, it does consume significantly more resources. Um, One of my favorite things to do, uh, or when I was first experimenting with VR and what kind of kept me into it, especially in the beginning, was to just be kind of a floating observation of the amazing builds that people put together. And uh, this is something that I think that we do need to optimize content, but at the same time, uh, being able to in VR in an open sim world with unoptimized textures, if you get curious about something like a flower, you can get your nose right up to it. And if it has an unoptimized texture, this creates a continuum where your curiosity can just guide you towards things. And I once saw a martini glass on a bar, and as I got closer to it, it had a raspberry. And as I got closer to it, you could see the hairs on the raspberry, and I was like, "Oh my gosh!" And and I don't even think in the normal viewer you'd be able to get close enough because it'll start clipping things. But in the VR viewer, there's an option to decrease that clipping range, so you can actually get even closer. Um, and this whole concept of that continuum kind of is at odds with the idea of hyper optimized content. Um, and so I don't really see it as a matter of trying to reduce the level of detail in order to facilitate. I see it more as trying to balance that equation in context. And I don't know if that answers the question, but uh,
I think his question was related to, are you experiencing any issues or is it better today? And I think what you're saying is we've had progress. So how far? I know I said I was going to move to puffball, but just one more. um, how much work do you think there's needed before we start seeing VR solutions that the public can use?
well, a lot of the things I've been talking about here are from the stereoscopic rendering
Right,
perspective. There's so many different layers. Like one of the things someone who might try the VR mod might notice compared to other experiences that is that there's no uh, corporeal presence. Like there's no tracking of the controllers that are is mapped to the avatar. I
right.
think that's one of the huge areas that for kind of a whole experience would have to be figured out.
So,
And
so by that presence, you mean whether you're seeing your hands and interacting with objects in the world, or whether you're seeing others if it's multiplayer, or whether you're getting a sense of your immersion within the environment. Is that what you mean?
yeah, yeah, both the sense of immersion as self and also the relationship with others and being able to communicate and gesture with nonverbal communication cues, which you start to get as you get the different tracking, or you can use your hands to express and things like that. Um, the system right now, like at the protocol level, like it has some capabilities of transmitting kind of real time, like you could get the head look direction kind of could be real time, but actually getting the joint information and things would require innovation. Right now, a lot of the animations are like they're prefabricated and distributed as UUIDs. Here, it would be more like the voice communications, and actually, the voice communication is probably a good reference point for like an avatar, uh, you know, uh, an avatar mixer concept would be needed with similar kind of low latency, high throughput requirements to do real time immersive, cohabitated spaces, with multiple avatars.
Mhm. Well, thank you for that. We appreciate those comments. So, Puffball, tell us about the benthic viewer and your inspiration for it.
Oh, all right. So, basically, the benthic viewer, it's a viewer project that the goal is to be have all of the core protocol stuff written entirely in Rust. So, I'm using Actix for the asynchronous stuff. So basically, everything in the system is an actor. So, um, it's able to run kind of using as quickly as Rust can go, as quickly as the actor framework can push it. So, um, I think the biggest goal of the project is to kind of create a translation layer between the extremely confusing Second Life OpenSimulator protocols that um, oftentimes will give you back a ton of like unused data in their packets, or give you back you know packets that are undocumented. Kind of go through everything, find a way to make the whole system work, and then allow users to take this kind of chunk of code and apply it to things like Godot. Because so, like, the goal of the project is to have it be kind of front end agnostic. So I've got one front end that's running in Bevy and one front end that's running in Godot, and you know, basically take as much information as I can from the client, from the servers, manage it in the core, and then send it out to the front ends. So this is all very, like, this has been my passion project for about 4 years now, but it's still, still getting its feet under it in a lot of ways. Just because figuring out information about how the protocol works is it can be really complicated, because a lot of the times the documentation is out of date, or you'll find like a legacy system and a legacy way it used to work, treat it as if it was still up to date, and then realize that it hasn't been used like that in like 20 years. So it's a lot. It's a lot of software archaeology, and like going through other projects and seeing how they've done it before, But it's a lot of fun. It's a blast.
That's wonderful. And we're so excited for your passion. And there have been a few comments in the audience, and they'd love for you later to share a link to your Benthic viewers so they know how to get involved or how to follow project. And thank you for that. Kay
Yeah, we can
McLennan
do that
put
right
one
now.
in as well. Before we got on the call, we were talking about protocols and any influences from the Linden Lab protocol. And we wanted to know how you felt about it, what you like about it, and what you do not.
So it's hard because you can kind of see how the protocol has evolved completely organically over the whole lifetime of the project. Like one thing that really comes to mind is when you're getting mesh data from the server, it's not coming in as its own packet or anything. It's coming in as a request to the capability endpoint to retrieve the mesh data, but then that returns a scene object that it has something called a sculpt texture. Like there's like a field for sculpt, and then it has texture, and that's the UUID of the mesh that you have to then get from a different endpoint. Well, from the same endpoint, but a different location on that endpoint. And I was confused because I was like, why would you call it that? Like, what is a sculpt texture? And because I'm not, I haven't been here the whole time, and so I started researching it. I was like, you mean to say that a sculpt texture is a texture where the red, green, and blue values are the X, Y, and Z coordinates for each pixel, like each vertex in a 3D object, and that's still in the protocol despite and there's some places that still use sculpt textures, but it's something that is so foreign to me. Like I didn't even imagine like that it could be like that. And so you'll find these things that are still in the protocol that haven't really been looked at for a long time. And since the whole protocol, it's all backwards compatible with everything, um you can't really get rid of it without breaking some hard work that somebody has put in years and years and years of their life to make. And so, like, part of the protocol stuff that I'm dealing with now is like I desperately want to make sure that I don't break anything, but I also can't implement everything that this protocol can do because it can pretty much do anything.
Yes, thank you for that. And of course, for the audience, they're all going Sculpties, and of course,
Yeah.
and when they first came out, we thought they were like magic. Then later, we became a little disenchanted with their performance. And of course, when you pull the camera back, when you pull it in close, they're deforming and reforming, and there's just a lot of issues with that behavior. But you're right about compatibility. I think that's one of the challenges we all face. So, are there any priorities that you have on your project that you're working on first?
So what I want to do basically is I want to be able to make a game. Like I want to be able to render avatars. I want to be able to render environments, talk, and kind of build out from the start of what if I was going to make an MMO using this tool. And as of right now, um, I've got players. I'm able to like download and add joints to actual avatars. And basically, how I'm working that is I'm getting all the data from the server. I'm crunching it all into a GLTF file, and then I'm sending that out to my UIs. So, um, I'm getting texture. I'm getting the land patches, and I'm able to render those as well. So, right now, the next expedition is figuring out how I'm rendering other people's avatars and environments. So, in order to do that, I have to set up the camera, and I have to set up you know a couple of other things. But the goal is basically to create a system where you will easily be able to like make games using this protocol, and I think that's going to be fantastic.
Thank you for that. And there's been some back channel chatter on, are Sculpey still working and all? So you brought up some compatibility issues of interest to the audience at large. You know, I think one of our great challenges is at what point is it appropriate to migrate away from um, certain features. And see, here in the open simulator community, we're always thinking about, will we always be influenced by Second Life for our features, or are we going to break free? I- I- and this game that you're describing is a perfect example of certain behaviors and persistence that you'd like to see possible. Um, it reminds me of when I attended a metaverse talk where we were thinking about what kind of protocols would we need if you created an avatar, whether it was Ready Player Me or some other tool, and you rigged the bones and you had everything animated and working. What would it take to take that between different game worlds to into different virtual worlds? What kind of consistency and change would we need to make that possible? That's a big
Yeah,
question,
so
I know.
for sure. I think the thing that I'm looking at when I'm kind of going from translating the actual protocol to what I'm going to be using for my project, I'm trying to find the most standard protocols. Like I'm using GLTF for my meshes right now because I know that GLTF is widely supported in a bunch of
Right.
places. But I'm also making sure that when I'm creating these GLTFs, I'm not binding myself to GLTF. So I kind of have a separate project that can generate GLTFs, but I can give the same information to a different thing and then generate a different type of file should the protocol want to change. So because the thing is like, the thing if I wanted to just make a federated virtual world, I would just do that. But
Mhm.
I think the thing that makes Open Simulator and these virtual worlds so special to me is the fact that they've been around forever. Like there are regions that you can still connect to where there are still sculpt textures and it renders just fine. And so like I wouldn't say that moving away from it is something that I necessarily want to do as opposed to like I just have to do in order to get what I want done. But I do intend to go back and get everything to work because there's something so magical about connecting to a region that just has been kind of in the same state as it's been for 20 years, and it's like you don't get that anywhere else. It's like, when you look at the new internet and you look at the new shiny metaverse projects or the new MMO projects, like they don't look like this. And I think if I wanted to create something like that, I would, but I want to contribute to this world with all of this legacy code and all of this history because it's like it's history. It's really cool.
And it's also all the content within it was user generated. That's what I found magical when I first joined these kinds of virtual worlds in 2005. That's what drew me in, is the fact that everyone could be a
Yeah.
creator, right? Everyone, and of course I'm a World of Warcraft player. I played 24 different MMORPGs. I've tested
Yeah.
and wrote test reports for 13 of them. So I'm right there with you on that kind of game experience, and how magical it would be if we had the ability to create persistent games that we felt some degree of ownership and continuity for. So we weren't dependent on someone hosting them and then them drying up or disappearing, you know. So I
That's
like that.
it's funny that you mentioned World of Warcraft too, because that's something else that I found always so interesting about World of Warcraft because it kind of had the same energy I found like in Open Simulator. It's like you'll go to these regions in World of Warcraft that are just they haven't been upresed and they just still have the old models. And
Mhm.
like you feel like you're able to like walk around in the history of it. And so, I want to, with my project, focus on making games because that's what I really want to do. But at the end of the day, like, I want to contribute to the community because this is a really special place. Like it's like nowhere else anywhere.
So let me shift the energy for just a moment. I'm going to ping back to Humble Tim and then back to you. Um, so, what do you need to help advance your project? Do you need contributions from others, ideas, play testers? Humble Tim, what do you need to help you get to the next level?
That is a great question. Um, hmm. I'd
Well,
say,
it's not an easy one, I know.
yeah. Well, there's a lot to it, and I think that it's actually not really the tech. It's not so much on the technical side. I think it's like some of the different like the different stakeholder sets, and like even something like GLTF, for example. Like it's easy to uh, uh, infuse it with being a like a strictly one-way kind of phenomenon when you're in the moment. Like I'm just exporting the GLTF, and I go to something else and I just import. But there really is a continuum there, and often you have to circle back. And when you think about the iteration that would be required to really balance these equations and build things out together, I think on like for immersive VR in the OpenSim kind of universe, I think that it would be gathering together those different stakeholder needs sets and really looking at how to balance the equations in a way that can be evolved across time incrementally, rather than thinking of it as like a whole meal. One day we will just have VR. Would be really useful to have as a foundation and to try and uncover the right conversations to take place, in the communities of communities kind of sense.
So if I understood correctly, because I understood most of what you said, but you know how it is. I'm thinking from a practical aspect, from the user perspective. So I'm representing the user community as the stakeholder of one stakeholder of interest. And I know there's many different types of users, aren't there? Whether we have the folks who are into design and or into animations or into whatever the behaviors are. And of course, you've already described some of your challenges if you're not fully immersed, right? If you're not aware of the presence of the avatar and the avatar's interaction with the world at large and others, I know those are some hurdles you're still working on. What are your next steps? Maybe that's the right question, Humble Tim. What are your next steps on your project?
Hmm. Well, at the moment, I consider it kind of in a sustainable maintenance mode,
Oh,
where
good.
I've gotten pretty good at. In the beginning, it was really rough, because it sits twice downstream. Linden Lab makes changes to the official Second Life open source viewer. Then the Firestorm team, who's also gotten pretty good at receiving these changes from upstream, has to integrate that. And then I'm way downstream after Firestorm and that has taken some I think I've redone the infrastructure like at least 5 times now, trying to find a way to make it so that if I haven't changed anything on my side, that I can kit bash the mod back together with the latest Firestorm and make a build. And now that that has kind of settled, it becomes a question, not so much I guess in where I would think to go next, but more like where are where's the stable ground to be able to build out some of the VR capabilities in a way that uh, complements the other changes that are being made. An example maybe is if you look at the Firestorm user interface. If you show the Firestorm user interface to someone who's never heard of it before,
Hmm.
I'm pretty sure they're a little overwhelmed. It's very dense. There's tons of features, and there's often more than one way to do something, to achieve something. And um, I actually always thought that this was a really great opportunity. It still could be to explore VR user experience design patterns, because here's a platform that has all of these features. It's 3D capable. It's immersive adjacent, but can be made immersive in the VR sense. I mean, and uh, and yet it has no hand controller bindings at all. So it's a fresh slate, And unlike some of the purely abstract user experience research, this has like the real, the reality backdrop where there's actual users using it, creating different things, creating different configurations. And so I think that's something that I is on my to-do list, is to kind of not necessarily to explore that myself so much as to set the stage to see where those experiments could go. Like what makes sense to map to hand controllers into VR. How would you make text chat blend into a spatial VR headset kind of experience? Those kind of things.
How would you represent text in VR comfortably? I mean, would it render effectively and be easy to read?
On modern HMDs, I'd say that we've kind of hit the point where um, it's more of a classic kind of design challenge where you could do it in a way that would be hard to read, but there's also ways to do it that would be usable and uh, practical. I can tell you what didn't work. Um, I got it in my head one day to turn all the Firestorm panels into floating 3D overlays like the Steam VR overlay. And
Uh-huh.
no, it's immediate, and I like to hoard browser tabs and things like that. So I'm kind of used to clutter, but oh no, it's just in a 3D having to turn around and trying to hunt down where you put the window and stuff is just
Right.
that definitely doesn't work. So it would probably look somewhat novel. Although there are some patterns like and some of the other platforms that are emerging where it like some best practices of sorts seem to be emerging that could be explored.
Oh, that's great. I'm glad you are experimenting with that and observed what doesn't work so well, because some of those features can really put some wear and tear on the user for that user experience, you know. Um, so let's see. So Puffball, what are your next steps as far as do you need play testers or at what point are you at the project and what will be your approach for involving the community?
Yeah, so a huge goal of this project is to be as user friendly or developer friendly as possible. So I have a couple issues open on the GitHub if you want to take a look at that. There's a lot of stuff that isn't like a huge amount of stuff that isn't implemented, but um, you know, so as of right now where we are at the project, my main priority is going to be figuring out the how to render other people's avatars and not just your own. And I'm sure that's going to be an easily solved problem, but it's just one of those things where it's like I realized the way that the protocol works drove me crazy, so I like put the project down for a couple weeks just to recover from the shock of the reveal. But yeah, just if anybody wants to help out with the code, I would love to help you help out because um that's my dream. It's like to be able to contribute to this community in a meaningful way. And you know, I know getting started on somebody else's projects is always really, really hard, but sitting down with someone who like, is ready to answer any question, I feel like gets people a long way. And code review, if anybody wants to look at what I've written and just read it for filth, I think that would be fabulous too, because I really want this code to be airtight, like very readable, very usable, very extensible, so that you know if we want to make protocol changes to the server or move OpenSimulator forward in cool directions, I really hope that this project could make that easier for people. And
That's
also
great.
docs. If anybody knows anything about the protocol and would like to help document that a little bit better, that's a huge help because at least half of my time doing this project is researching and opening Wireshark and like reading, you know, the packets data, which drives you crazy after a while. So if you find yourself in the position of a very protocol savvy person and would like to, consult, that would be fabulous as well.
Now, when you're reading those packets, what are you looking for?
So half the protocol is basically HTTP requests that you can go back and forth between the
Mhm.
capability endpoints, and then half of them are UDP packets. And a lot of the times, since there's no kind of cogent documentation on how everything goes from point A to point B, I'll like log in with Firestorm and I'll get the packet data of every packet that it was sent between logging in and this, and then I'll have to go through and find and read the headers, kind of like hex, like just like kind of get a feel for like which hex corresponds to which number, and then look at that to see if I can find the packet that I'm looking for. And it's difficult
Yes, it
sometimes.
is. It is. But it's great that you're
But
describing this because often people say, how can I get involved? And they don't realize there's so many different perspectives, roles, and bits of scrutiny that's needed. And then you need some specific results when they do this, right? What is it you would like someone to tell you if if they reviewed all these packets? What is it you want to discover?
oh, so it's really just the flows of like this packet comes after this packet comes after this packet. Like one thing that I'm dealing with right now is like you'll log into a region and then you'll look around and you'll be like, okay, so what is in this area? And you don't actually get that information until you turn the camera towards it, and then you don't get that information until you request a certain packet that you send to the server, and then the server sends that to you. And so it's these like handshakes that happen, because a lot of these in the protocol, it's like, logging in is a handshake that takes like 4 or 5 steps every single time. And you don't really have a whole lot of information about in what order and which of those are actually required and which of those are legacy. And so, like, so many of these handshakes have to happen, and so much of them you kind of just have to know. And so, you know, like that's the issue that I'm dealing with right now, is like rendering scenes and stuff like that. Like I can load in person like people who just spawn in, but apparently you need to send another packet just to make sure to basically ask the server to start sending you data of stuff that doesn't hasn't just loaded in. So it's like a whole process, and it's there's so much esoteric like wisdom that you kind of need that it makes you feel like a sorcerer sometimes.
That's right. Well, we appreciate all your hard work. You have a Discord server, don't you?
I do. You should totally join it. And you can
Actually, I
watch
am a
me real
member of it,
time.
but I wanted the audience to be able to too.
Yes, I'll send a link. I'm saying that to the audience.
Great. That's good. You
Um,
know, um, yeah, that's great. Humble Tim, I was thinking, remember that example I was talking about of our Sakurajima app that we created for Meta? Our challenge was a little different than yours because you were, of course, adapting and putting this feature onto the Firestorm capability. And so you're building on these protocols and what you learn from Linden Lab and from Firestorm. In our case, we were trying to represent the avatar, the hands, the interaction, the ability to pick up an object and directly manipulate it. And of course, we couldn't do that at first with our virtual world content. So we created, and I say we, but it was Andy Stricker, Spinoza Quinnell, who did all the coding. Um, created the set of hands that didn't exist in Meta at the time. This was a couple years, maybe 3 years ago, and time really flies, you know. And so these hands, you would use them and you would gesture with your controllers. And of course, you could do these interactions. Then Meta came out with their own set, and we had this double exposure of hands that weren't quite matching up. They were a few, uh, you know, a little bit off from each other, and we had to remove out some of ours and rewrite our code. And we noticed we constantly had an update and integration problem because of that, trying to adapt to their system. When you're using a headset, a head-mounted display device to view your work, the one that's in the maintainer phase, what kind of HMD are you using? And do you have you tried any of these direct manipulation tasks, or are they out of scope for your work?
Uh, I use right now I use an old Samsung Odyssey Plus, which is
Mhm.
just easy to tote around with a laptop and plug in. Although I'm on in the market eyeing for my next headset. I actually ran experiments with picking things up with hand controllers in the Firestorm VR mod, and it's actually a lot of fun, especially like if you come from if having so much experience just exploring through Firestorm in a classic mode, and then wanting to be able to grab things, but having to either use the mouse, and then it depends on if the creator has arranged for that in a lot of cases. And once you actually get it one to one with your hands in VR, it takes on this whole nother like dimension of
Mhm.
like agency sensation. And this was just a local experiment, like not yet sending edit packets out, but just being able to run up and like pick stuff up, and like instead of having to like walk up to get your nose close to something, to be able to pick something up and hold it up and appreciate it and look at all the details, really did take it up a whole nother level. And I think there's a lot of unexplored opportunity on that front in the future, if the other things can be balanced. Um, but yeah, I think that synchronizing some of the concepts will require additional innovation too, like like the menu system for interacting with, like, even to sit like on furniture here, like somehow figuring out how to make that vibe with using hand controllers, maybe even full body tracking. to take a seat is unexplored territory right now in the viewer code. Um, yeah, I think that some of the things that could be worked on could anticipate what might be coming in the future, and then other things will be like kind of the hand situation where um, you know early prototyping is likely to be to create in code sense like a merge conflict later, um, but uh, but I think that there's plenty of opportunity to actually start prototyping those things, like even so, and to help inform that whether it's coming from upstream sources or some of the some of the new viewer technology would be a great place, I think, to start looking at some of that stuff.
That's great. Well, you made me think of, by the way, I teach futuring and innovation. And I'm, of course, a futurist who thinks 20 years in the future, not just next year.
Hmm.
So, this next question, imagine for a moment, and this is for both of you. I'll start with Puffball and then move to you, Humble Tim. But imagine if in the future, anything was possible, what would you like to see possible for your project? What would you like to add to it? Certain capabilities, features, language use, tools, whatever, or integration. What might that be? Puffball, over to you.
I think my dream for this 20 years down the line would be um to have this project kind of become a real MMO. Like people are able to create their own user generated worlds, kind of like create federations with each other and kind of have a big game that everyone can play and get along and have fun. And if one user doesn't like their administration, they can just sail away to a different world and then become a resident of there and stuff like that. Kind of it, lean more into the gaminess of it, because like I want there to be a virtual world that's ours, like something that belongs to the people who like it and love it. And for those video games memories to like not just disappear because the company changed course or shut down. Like I want there to be a virtual world that has the kind of history that OpenSimulator has, like an MMO that has legends that like OpenSimulator has. And it's very interesting, it's very fun, and I want to see if we could have that happen.
One of the behaviors you're describing sounds very similar to the hypergrid that we enjoy in OpenSim, this ability to
Well,
visit grids where we don't have an account.
that's exactly it. That's honestly why I'm even interested in the first place. That's the thing that got me so excited about it, because I'm a Mastodon admin, and so federated virtual worlds are like my favorite thing ever. And so the idea to kind of have a virtual world system similar to Mastodon, where you have all these instances and they kind of have their own cultures and their own users, and you know kind of structure that in a way that you would log on and want to play it like you would want to play World of Warcraft. I think that's my dream, and I love the hypergrid. It's the coolest thing ever.
One of the challenges, I always have to bring up challenges too, right? And then
Mhm.
I'm going to cut over to you, Humble Tim. But one of the challenges, of course, many of our communities face is, of course, intellectual property rights and who owns content and content being ripped off. See, we enjoy such affordances of being able to visit places, create content, uh, share content if those permissions are set, and remove content. And then the question always is, what about intellectual property rights? Have you thought about that at all?
I'm like gripping my laptop. Have you guys heard of OCAPN? I have a friend who works at Sprightly, and oh my god, we had like an 8-hour discussion about it. And we were like completely, lost in the sauce about like we could use OCAPN to like secure the like make sure that there's intellectual property. Like we were having so much fun, and I really love what Sprightly's doing. So I'm gonna, you know, like that is like for sure one of the biggest, most exciting things that I could think of is like implementing OCAPN in the protocol. And I think that would actually go a long way, because getting into it would totally derail this entire conversation. But look it up. You should totally look it up. Sprightly
Sure,
is really cool.
sure. Well, that sounds great. And thank you for that. So, Humble Tim, your dream list for the future. If anything was possible, where do you want your project to head?
Well, I feel very fortunate to have the experience leading up to be able to get an idea such as, oh, I think I'll compile the viewer with Peter Kapler's VR mod, and just to make it harder, I'll try to teach GitHub Actions how to do that too, for automated builds. And as part of that whole experience, a thought that keeps entering my mind is like what would making this potential accessible best look like? Because if I could snap my fingers, then everyone can compile the viewer for themselves. That doesn't really solve for that. You still have to know how to code and how to code in a way that's compatible and doesn't crash things. And so it's like in that thought of making it more accessible, there's all these different kind of challenges. And um, but I think that it's like back maybe touching on the idea of balancing creator content, their intended kind of use of their content versus the openness of the open source. Like, because on the one hand, it's open source, and so you could make it so everyone, you can make it way easier to be able to self-compile. But at the same time, there's the kind of the civil layer of interacting as a community within that open source, and so it makes sense to balance that. And I think what I would like to see is opportunity made to make working on the technology layer as accessible as possible, while also being mindful and aware of balancing the creator content situation as well. And that's I think a tricky one to even talk about
Yeah, it
because
is.
yeah, but I think there are options, and I think there's plenty of more openness and accessibility that could be uncovered, and there's innovations and new technology solutions as well, which could help balance that, in the other direction too. Um, and
Well, thank you
so
for
yeah.
that. Yeah. We had one more question, and I see we're almost at the end of time. Frank Ruloff had asked, let's see, let me grab it here. He had asked a question for Puffball on with all the work done to figure out protocols, are you putting in that interface for others?
Yes. So another, one of the main since with the biggest goal of the project is to be very developer friendly. I'm trying to maintain like my own docs that kind of explain in really high level about how everything goes together. So kind of just like a fresh start for the documentation is my hope with my project is like I know exactly how this works because I wrote the whole thing and I had to figure it out myself. So I don't want to have any of the legacy stuff in there without denoting it very specifically as legacy. I want to really just like make sure that you know my Rust code itself is as documented as possible. I want to make sure that the entire project's workflows are as documented as possible so that nobody ends up in this position again.
Oh, that's
Because
wonderful.
it's really difficult.
Yeah, it is. It is. So you're confronting both process and product.
Yeah,
That's
like I
great.
really, really like I want to make sure that everybody knows like how this protocol works. Like I want to point at a random person in the audience, be like, "Hey, how would you figure out how like this shoe is rendering into the scene?" And I want you to be able to click on a web page and then just tell me everything about it because like that's really like the hardest part about the viewer projects is just it's really hard to know how it works.
Mhm.
And but it we know it does. Like we're here, it does work. And so like just kind of uncovering all of this murky water um and then getting to the truth of it is like the goal of the project is to just be able to put it down there, write it all down, and just be like, if we need to ever do this again, just look at these docs.
That's great. Okay, thank you. And Humble Tim, if I understood correctly, as we're wrapping up, your project is on GitHub and interested parties can compile it and use it with their head-mounted display device?
Yeah, there's builds available on the GitHub releases page. By Austin's blog is probably the best, most up-to-date resource. And there's a Discord channel linked from the GitHub and the blog. It's it's just a small niche kind of low traffic, but when we can, we field questions and if folks come in and want to learn how to compile it for themselves, I'd be happy between things to find time to help you do that.
Well, thank you. Thank you, HumbleTim and Puffball, for an informative and interesting presentation. We've been thrilled to talk with you today, and we hope you come back another next year. As a reminder to our audience, you will want to check out the conference.opensimulator.org to see what is coming up on the conference schedule. You won't want to miss our next session, which begins at 1:30 p.m. in this keynote region, and it's entitled the title is actually changed, but it's a virtual world simulation for mental health via the polyvagal theory. Also, we encourage you to visit the OSCC 25 Poster Expo in the OSCC Expo 3 region to find accompanying information on presentations and explore the hypergrid resources in OSCC Expo 2 region, along with the sponsor and crowdfunder booths located throughout all of the OSCC Expo regions.